So, hi everyone. Welcome to the new podcast where we look into what is out there for the data engineering, data analytics, machine learning, and everything data. And today I'm joined with Jared, who is a co-founder and the CEO of Visivo, based in Columbus, Ohio area, where he leads an effort to build the business intelligence tools that enables companies to make smarter decisions and iterate faster. With a background in mechanical engineering from Ohio State University, Jared is passionate about the data-driven insights and has extensive experience in analytics, data management, and financial engineering. So, welcome, Jared.
Yeah, hey Arthurs, thank you for having me on. Appreciate the opportunity to come on, chat a little bit about Visivo, chat a little bit about data. Um, and yeah, excited to get into it.
Okay, so for those who doesn't know, like this is the kind of like I'm trying the new kind of the podcast, as I mentioned. The idea is to, look whatever is out there and then basically try to reach out to people and ask them to join and basically share about the tools. So Jared, thank you very much. Once again for, calling. What would be the right way saying? Responding to my call, and and I hope we'll learn more about the Visivo, what it does, and also our watchers and listeners can learn about that tool. And before we begin, I would like to get into the icebreaker question. So that's usually like what I do. So the question is very simple. So if you would need to choose between approach of the data engineering using SQL or approach of the data engineering using like Pandas data frame or like Spark data frame or any other data frame, which would you prefer?
Yeah, so I think the trendy answer right now would be to say Polars
Okay.
and DuckDB. I haven't used either. I've been meaning to use both, but I'm a SQL person. I'll get in a notebook now and then, but if it's in a database already, I'm just going to write a query.
Yeah, and that's the right answer. Sorry, there is no there is no other answer. Okay.
Well, I'm glad I passed.
Yeah,
That's
me too. Okay, let's jump into and try to give a little bit more of a stage. So would you mind sharing a little bit more like what is the backstory of the Visivo, how you decided to
yeah.
create such product? Stage is yours.
Yeah, so I've been in analytics for almost a decade, and one of the issues that I've run into at companies large and small, infrastructure, very different infrastructures, some on a bunch of distributed Hadoop instances, and some that are just running against transactional databases and aggregating in a BI tool. Others that are taking the more modern data approach. All of them have difficulties when they get to the visualization component. And so what I consistently ran up against was challenges maintaining, building, and collaborating with people on the data visualizations that ultimately would enable stakeholders in the business to drive um, improvements in the product, to move metrics, and to take action. And so I've been in a lot of situations where there's really good data at these companies, but just a lack of ability to get it there. And so when I joined Empora, um, I was I had the good fortune of being able to set up the analytics infrastructure from scratch. And so when we configured that infrastructure, we went looking for this BI tool that I imagined existed, but just
Mm-hmm.
didn't have access to at these other companies. And what we found is that there was no BI tool that effectively enabled a workflow where you could develop locally, write tests against your visualizations, deploy your visualizations in lockstep with your transformations, and deploy visualizations to multiple environments. And all of those things unlock the ability to maintain more things, to have collaboration across analysts. And so um, we started working on building it. And fast forward a little bit, we've been working on the tool for a little while for Empora's use case as an open source tool. Some people in the Columbus community wanted to start using it as well. We set up a Stripe integration and found ourselves with a company.
It's nice. So, okay, I must ask because everyone will be asking, like, what do you mean there is no reporting tools? There is a bunch of those. Like you have, like at least for
Sure.
the free ones, like I could mention like a superset. Like so, like I just trying to figure out like so why, for example, not superset? Like
Yeah,
when
that's
you
a great
worked in the
question.
company. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, yeah. So one one thing that we've ran into with a lot of the BI tools on the market, and it certainly is a crowded space. There are a lot of
Hmm.
BI tools, to be fair. You've got your stalwarts with Tableau and Power BI and um, Looker. I think you could consider a stalwart at this
Hmm.
point. Um, and then some of the newer, those generally are more like DAX based
Hmm.
BI tools. So they are taking a big data set. I think Superset works like this too. They're taking a big data set, they're slicing it,
Yes.
um, and then they're doing aggregations in memory on it, or on their application if it's cloud based. Um, and then there's a different set of BI tools that's sort of like your Mode, Redash,
Hmm.
Metabase that essentially just take queries, take the outputs, and put them in
Yes.
charts.
Correct.
Um, and so those are really the two options that we saw in the marketplace. And what we wanted was something that was a little different. We wanted something that we could connect directly to the outputs of our transformations, so our SQL Mesh or DBT models.
Hmm.
And we wanted to take those models um, and say, here's how we pull revenue per week from this particular model.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, and then once you have that defined in one spot, Plotly calls that a trace. And we liked that
Hmm.
concept of traces a lot.
Hmm.
Um, and so once you have that, you can take that and you can put it on a chart and you can add access labels to that chart and you can add all kinds of other things. And the beautiful thing, if you take that modular approach, is that you can take that trace and put it a bunch of different places.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
and you've got
Uh,
continuity and um,
got
yeah,
it. I think I kind of like so. This is interesting. So, okay. I mean, okay. So you were not happy with the dashboarding tools or the reporting tools, so you came up and created a new one. I mean, and then that this new one pushed into the creating the company. I mean, that's sort of like like that's clear now. I liked what you said about creating, like a metric and then defining this metric and then reusing this metric all the time. Can
yeah,
you like share a little bit more, about that? Because I think one of the problem which you solve by doing that is that you creating a taxonomy of the company-wide metrics. So then you cannot have like a 5 different revenue interpretations across the
right.
company, and whenever you have like a single metric it's just like in there. Is that, am I getting like the sense about?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it's that data consistency problem that you're
Mm-hmm.
touching on there, where when you have all of these things kind of feed into each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that most BI tools only have a single production instance, just kind of
Mm-hmm.
taking a step back,
Yeah.
um, means that everyone is developing in production. And if everyone's developing in production, then you need highly specialized people who have deep domain expertise to develop specific dashboards,
Mm-hmm.
or else they'll be broken. And even then, they probably are still going to be broken. but um, and what that means is that there's no collaboration across those
Mm-hmm.
silos, and so then you end up with those different metrics that you're talking about. And so
Mm-hmm.
having the ability to define them singularly is part of the solution. But if you don't have the ability to collaborate effectively on pull requests and
Mm-hmm.
deploying to multiple different environments, I think you will still see that problem in other solutions where you can define um, metrics that are reusable in modular components. And I think you do in a lot of these tools where you can reuse different components of your chart. The unique thing about Visivo is you can take that trace and you can stick it, you can combine it with other traces. So you can put revenue per week on the same, and you can do that in combination with, I don't know, number of orders per week
Okay.
um, on one chart. And then on a different chart, you could combine it with maybe overlay a big number of total sales
Okay.
onto it. Um,
So if you would summarize, right? So like if let's say so okay, let's say I'm a small organization and like I want to I don't know, like I'm running some web shop. I have some, like sales happening, and now I want to basically, like
Sure,
start drawing, like as you mentioned, like sales, like some sort of like, like the charts of whatever happening in my infrastructure. Let's say we figure out the way how to push the data to the tool and to display that. What is the learning curve to actually set up the tool? Like what skills do you need to have, like to be able to actually
yeah, that's
launch
a great
that?
question. So we are aiming to make it less and less technical
Mm-hmm.
as time goes on. I think there's always going to be a technical component to working with data. There's an inherent geometry
Mm-hmm.
to knowing the inputs that you have and the outputs that you're looking for
Mm-hmm.
with information, and that requires some degree of um, mathematical thinking in any case. But we want to lower those barriers as much as possible. Today, in the current state, um, a Visivo power user looks like someone, probably a analytics engineer, um, would be very comfortable in
Mm-hmm.
um, in Visivo. So the ability to run simple CLI commands, um, the ability to comfortability with using Git,
Mm-hmm.
making a pull request, branches, um, doing reviews, merging pull requests. So not a super high technical threshold by any
Okay.
means, but it's a barrier that's going to that in the current state makes it something that you would really have your engineering or your data engineering, your analytics engineering data team org manage entirely.
Okay.
On the front end, there's a lot of interactive components
Mm-hmm.
you can build with Visivo that stakeholders can interact with, and it gives them
Okay.
a lot of ability to drill into the information without having to do any of that. But from a developer standpoint,
So, okay, so if I am a data engineer, so okay, when I'm still are. So I'm a data engineer, right? And like I like backend. I hate front end. Like I like,
yeah,
building pipelines. I like moving data. I like building data models. I just love them.
right,
Every time I asked to build a dashboard, I was like, oh my God, like I hate that because like I don't know. Like
yeah,
so this kind of like feels that would be good for me because like I have some
for
sort
sure,
of like configuration. I add the things and just like build a nice dashboard and I just like ship the dashboard and
yeah,
that's it, right?
yeah. I think you would love it, Arteris. So like, um, the if you like building pipelines, you're gonna love
Yeah.
it because the whole thing is a DAG, right?
Okay.
The dashboard in the current state is essentially your terminal
Okay.
node, and I guess the most basic source would be a database connection.
Mhm.
We call that a source, and then after that, you'd have a model,
Mhm.
which you probably would want to define in DBT or SQL Mesh, but we give you the ability to define them
Mhm.
too if you want to do it all purely in Visivo. Um, and then after that, you'd have your trace, and then a model, or sorry, trace, and then a chart, and then that goes in your dashboard.
Wait. So it's not just reporting tool, you also run transformations? So that's what I'm hearing? So, so
You can if you want to. It's not an area that we
okay,
focus on deeply.
how it is intended to be used, let's put it this way. And let's say I
Yeah,
don't want to use dbts. I only like look, I like SQL, right? So I don't want to use
right.
dbt. So is there a place for me to use this tool?
Yeah, you can create a SQL-based model
Hmm.
and then have a trace reference that model
Okay.
and then add that trace to as many charts or tables as you'd want. So, yeah, for sure. And the other thing that I wouldn't say we have a very strong um, data transformation focus. The
Hmm.
models are not self-referential.
Hmm.
So right now, I guess it would be if someone wanted that, we could talk about that. But We do have a pretty strong data virtualization offering
Hmm.
though, where because of Visivo's architecture, it actually enables you to do some really cool things where you can bring in information from different sources
Hmm.
at different grains onto the same chart, right? So
Okay.
um, you could run, um, and it doesn't even have to be SQL connections. You can run a we call it a CSV script model,
Hmm.
and essentially it's a bash command that produces a well-formatted CSV,
Hmm.
and then it takes that model and it stores it in a SQLite database locally,
Hmm.
and then you can write queries against that SQLite database in your traces and in additional models if you want. And so that ability makes it interesting for situations where you want to push compute further down to the source
Hmm.
as well. This might be getting into more of the technical weeds than
No,
than
I,
you want
I
to
I
do
love
here,
the
but
technical weeds, and that's the my only intent. So my not only my intent as well. Like sorry for asking. Like, do you maybe have like a diagram of how that works, which you could
yeah,
share?
yeah, definitely.
Because like I would,
Let me,
I'm a visualized person. I think like for me and for
yeah,
everyone else would be that interesting to would be a little bit like more fun too.
yeah, we
And
should
and
definitely look at some charts here. Um, so this is
so yeah,
just
perfect.
from our
Hmm.
landing page here.
Yeah.
I put all our best stuff on there. So I think the one that would really be worth spending some time on. Here we go. That's what I wanted.
Perfect.
Um, is this chart because this is
Mhm,
explaining that DAC concept that we were just touching on.
mhm,
Um, where you can have uh, essentially this CSV script
mhm,
component that um, flows into a model, and and then you can reference those models and traces and charts and combine all of these things. Um, and in theory, if you really wanted to go crazy, you could connect to every single database under the sun and bring it together in a single dashboard.
So, question. So the model, is it a part of the Visivo, or is it just something what you reference in the source?
Yeah, so
Or in other
the
words, my
model
question,
you could
sorry for
define in
interrupting.
Visivo.
Okay, but let me put it this way. So does the Visivo has its own storage to store the results for the dashboards?
Yeah, so the results that go into the dashboards get stored. And so models are a little bit upstream. Models are
Mhm.
almost like views in your database.
Okay.
Um, and the outputs of the traces, which run against your
Mhm.
models, are what we're going to be storing and pushing up in
Oh,
lockstep with the dashboards. And
so
so,
if you sorry for interrupting you. So if you are in situation where your database is down, you're still able to present the charts or the dashboards without any
yep,
issues. Is that true? That's
yep, that's
cool.
right.
So that's cool. So
And
you actually can sort like I'm for interrupting, but like come on, this
oh no,
is
no,
we're
this
not scripting. But so basically what I'm hearing is that like I could buy like in AWS some like serverless MySQL as an example. Like I could buy like something like a serverless MySQL, and then what I can do with that is that I can run, like something to build a dashboard out of that, and then be good for a day. I can just shut it down, and like it's sort of
right,
like it is that's cool. The only downside though is that so what is your database running, if I may ask? So like what is the
right.
like what's the database to feeding the charts or dashboard, sorry.
Yeah, so it depends on what the customer wants to do
Okay.
ultimately. Um, so we have different ways of storing and serving up the dashboards. So there's
Hmm.
there's an enterprise option where you can store all of the information on premise because kind of for the reason you just touched on, Visivo
Mhm.
has a really compelling security component to it. We don't connect
Mhm.
to your databases, and we don't know your credentials.
Mhm.
So that's all done in the command line and when you deploy,
Mhm.
and you control all of that within your own resources, right? And so um, we actually also, so on the storage end and how these dashboard components end up getting served in,
Mhm.
um, for some enterprise customers, we offer um, essentially using their cloud storage
Mhm.
and enabling them to keep all of the data stored in there, and then we just authenticate back and forth
Mhm.
um, with their cloud provider to get the dashboards and pass them through to the client, um, on their users on the user side, client side. The other way
I'm
that we
sharing
typically
again,
do
maybe.
it.
Yeah. Mhm.
Oh yeah, sure. The standard way that we do it is we host the information in a NoSQL
Mhm.
file store, and then we serve up the dashboards from there.
Okay.
Um, you can also deploy it as a static website if you want. If you run Visivo dist, it gives you a static website with everything that you need, and you can deploy it to Netlify or non-Visivo resources too. So that's kind of the open source.
Mhm.
I don't want to deal with Visivo, the company at all approach.
Okay.
Um, and
Okay.
so that's also a nice way to make public dashboards as
So
well.
this is so I'm sure you've thought of all of that. As I said, like the purpose of this is to understand what is the best customer for the product and where it's the best
Sure.
value, which I see, right? Again, but this is my opinion, like nothing more, like it's gonna be like another thing which I remember from my experience, we had the use case where we had partners which wanted to see our data, and like we don't want to allow them into our infrastructure, right? And this is
Yeah.
sort of like very bad. Like imagine you have like a Power BI. Now what, you will give them access to your Power BI? Like
Right.
yes, you could carve the access and things like that, but then if you have like hundreds of the customers, like how you will deal with that?
Hard to
So
do.
things like, what you just mentioned, like, hey, building the static data, or like building a database for them and just sharing these dashboards, because that's usually what they very often want. They don't need to have
Yeah.
this deep slicing analysis. They just want to have a dashboards of whatever it is.
Right.
This is
Something
not
static.
dependent. This is not dependent on your backend in any form. You just build,
Nope.
prepare. This is amazing. This is really, really cool.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, that's
Um,
that's yeah. Tell me
yeah,
more.
and it has advantages too for internal customers, right?
Hmm.
So, like, I'm sure you've run into this before, but um, dashboards typically are not used at all, and then they're used a ton, and then they're not used at all. And
Yes, of course.
some dashboards go through multiple cycles. Most dashboards just do that once.
Yes.
But for the dashboards that go through multiple cycles of not being used and being used a ton, um, what ends up happening a lot of the times is something upstream changes
Mhm.
and the data is dramatically different, even back in time where it shouldn't be different,
Mhm.
um, from what you're seeing before. So those types of situations I've seen lead to a lot of problems in board meetings, and
Mhm.
especially or internally if you share metrics with an executive and now they've changed, that can be a problem for you. Um, and so the nice thing about Visivo is because we're deploying everything, we can actually show you what the dashboard looked like last week,
Mhm.
6 months ago, whenever you were looking at it
Mm.
last. And then we can also tell you, here's what the commit SHA was at the time
Mhm.
that this dashboard was deployed. So you'll have all the code of the time that that dashboard was live, and you'll have the dashboard itself. Now you can pretty quickly get to the bottom of what's actually changed in this information, why revenue is 10% lower last month than you reported it was for no reason now, right? Which I've seen happen before. Um,
That's okay. So I will be honest with you. I myself am data engineer, so I deal with the reporting
sure,
barely, like very little, right? So I'm this is sort of like a different, world for me. And I think the next question which I have for you, so what you're giving is the spreadsheet with the reports slide in it, right? As I'm just giving as an example, but that's what you
Sure.
can share. So when do you think the people should consider switching from the spreadsheet or Google Sheets into using Visivo? Like, is there any,
Yeah.
like I hope that makes sense as a question, right? Because like you can build a static dashboard using, like Google
Sure.
Sheets, but like when do you think like you should consider switching?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I think Google Sheets, I mean, SQL has stood the test of time, right? We started this conversation with that
Yeah.
conversation around SQL versus data frames. Excel has also stood the test of time. It's a great tool. It's fantastic for conceptualizing an idea,
Mhm.
jotting down some numbers, and coming up with a projection. Then you can make a really quick chart. And so um, I think there's probably really probably where it starts to where you want to consider building a data pipeline in general, which is I think kind of
Mhm.
the core question more so than like when should you start using Visivo. Visivo is one way you could build your whole data pipeline in Visivo. That is one thing you
Mhm.
could do. But for the typical business owner that is using Excel currently, I think the question is like when do you need to automate your data stack
Yeah.
essentially from manually entering in Excel to I'm going to connect with all of my business
Mhm.
systems, centralize the information, or do a data virtualization approach and generate metrics. And I mean, like any other business question, it's probably just
Mhm.
when the return is worth it, right? So if it's taking up a ton of your time and preventing you from doing other value added activities to do the data
Mhm.
entry and to manage these Excel spreadsheets, then it's probably worth looking at spinning up the data stack. But if you're not to that point yet, then you're not to that point yet.
But I guess, like, if I am, I don't know, like a CEO, which I'm not, and you are, and well, but that's not applied to you because you know SQL. So if I'm a CEO who doesn't know SQL and stuff, I cannot use
Sure,
this tool, right? Like, it requires to have a special knowledge
you'd
about
have to
data
hire.
engineering. So whenever you're going into the stage where, like, well, we need this person to deal with data, so this is when you should consider a tool like that. Is that like accurate approximation?
Yeah, I think when you have a data team, you would
Okay.
consider a tool like Visivo. So our target customer right now would be someone who is a kind of a jack of all trades
Mhm.
analytics engineer at a company that's I don't know 50 to 200 people.
Mhm.
And maybe towards the 200, there's like three or
Mhm.
four of them, right? But a small team
Mhm.
at a medium-sized company that um, is doing the entire pipeline themselves
Yeah.
and trying to make it work. And they're super time constrained. And typically, what I've found is that the BI component is the biggest constraint. And so
Yes.
for that team, this is a way out of that maintenance cycle of my Power BI dashboard's broken
Mhm.
again, or my Tableau dashboard's broken again, or insert any tool.
Oh, yeah. Tell me how
Um,
many times I heard like, "Hey,
and
dashboard is broken," and the solution and the reason why is because your database is down,
sure, yeah,
and that's basically like
yeah,
even
that happens for maintenance, standard maintenance, and
yeah, just like
everything
why I don't
fails.
see my numbers because we have a dashboard because we have a database down. Uh,
Yeah,
that's really cool, Jared. So I want to go a little bit further. So okay, so uh, is the Visivo free or paid? Because you have a company, so it means that there is
yeah,
like a commercial product. So I guess is there an open? You mentioned, and also you mentioned there is an open source. So what's the difference between two, if you could share? And I
yeah,
think I'm more interested, like, yeah. So is there an open
sure.
source? What I can do with that, and what's the benefit of having paid version? Because like I definitely will not pay for now.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, we'd love to have you check out the open source version and
Oh, thank you.
push up a couple projects. So um, yeah, so the open source version. our perspective on the open source is that it's really the engine that drives the entire thing for us.
Hmm.
Um, if our core thesis is that if developers are enabled to do significantly more with a lot less and find joy in building dashboards, which I have never felt with anything else, um, then we will find we will find really valuable things in the application that
Hmm.
complement the command line tool that are worth paying for. And there's a couple of those that we can talk about that are included in the paid versions. But um, the open source tools are focused, and so the entire command line is open source. There's nothing in the command line that
Hmm.
is feature gated,
Hmm.
um, and so you can generate your entire project, run it locally, develop it locally, run tests, alerts, everything in the command line. Um, and that's all part of the open source. And then for a single user, you can also deploy that for free. So our free tier is just one user per account, and you can deploy as many things as you want for free,
What does it mean,
with
one user per
reasonable
account?
limits.
Like I'm kind of like trying to figure out. So what does it mean deploy? Am I deploying that somewhere, or am I just deploying that's like when you say you deploy?
Yeah,
So like what's that? What does that mean?
yeah, that's a great question. So um, whereas most PI tools are following that whole architecture, where they have your credentials, they've got your database information, and they're
Hmm.
running queries. And so then you have those situations where your database is down,
Hmm.
dashboards break. Visivo takes a different approach. We're push based. So when you want to update your dashboards, you run Visivo in the command line somewhere,
Hmm.
and then you deploy your entire project to the Visivo application. And
Oh, I
so,
see.
yeah, that's what deploying is, essentially updating your project, updating all the data, checking the configurations if they're
Oh,
different, and pushing out the new version.
I
Um,
mean, I will be honest with you, I don't like that, but it's my opinion. However, that's kind of like makes sense. So what I could do, like, hey, if I have a customers to which I want to build a dashboard, it's like, hey, there is this link to the Visivo where you just press on that, and this is where you'll find your dashboards which you want to look at. Is the
right.
basically the idea, right? So,
Yeah, and the idea behind that too is that most production analytics databases are
mhm,
not real time anyways.
yeah,
So they're only as fresh as your latest production transformation. So you would
hmm,
stack this right behind your DBT or SQL mesh
hmm,
transformation. Um, and then the data is as fresh as it's going to be. It doesn't matter if
okay,
someone hits the database over and over again, right?
okay.
It won't change until the transformation runs again.
So, but I could write it locally with Visivo Serve, right? Like I can watch that
Yeah.
locally. So I can just run that on my laptop and share the dashboards on my laptop. Would that work?
Yeah. Yeah. That
Oh,
would definitely
yeah,
work.
we
And
have a
if you wanted to
workaround
spin
for
up an
that.
EC2 instance and
Yeah, and just like do the same thing.
um,
So,
sure.
okay,
Um, and so that's one way
interesting.
you could deploy it open source. That would
Hmm.
probably be a more difficult. I'd be interested if you try that to see how it goes. I think it would infrastructure wise, that might be more challenging. The easiest way to deploy the open source and not do it through the application
Hmm.
is to run Visivo dist, which
Hmm.
generates a static site, and then you can push up that static site to
Yeah. So,
Metafly or something like that.
I think this is because like when you were talking to me of the open source version and sort of like explaining all the things, I kind of was a little bit that doesn't sound open source at all. But like if I have an option to actually have a
Oh,
build,
sure.
if I have an option to build an HTML and just present that,
Yeah.
that's fully valid. So, like I can use that, I can share that inside one company, I can
Yep.
build. I do see a lot of values when I push this out, and this is outside of my infrastructure because like maybe I don't want to deal with the infrastructure, which is a pain on its own. So
Yep.
it's yeah. I mean,
Authentication,
yeah,
access
exactly.
control.
So, and then of course, I assume the paid version, the licenses is per user or something like that, who is able to connect and see that.
Yeah, so we do it
Just briefly, I
essentially
don't.
per user.
Okay,
Essentially per user.
yeah, okay. And then I assume
We
there
give
is
you a
like,
certain amount per
yeah,
tiers, and
yes.
um,
So, and then I assume like if I want to have like enterprise, like no one will be listening of the enterprise things, but like if I want an enterprise or
sure.
something, most likely there is a way to make a deal where the thing is running in our infrastructure, because like even if you don't touch our data, we don't believe you, and we want to have everything in house and basically not
Sure.
have you at all. I think that's also would be a solution, right? Something.
Yep. Yeah, that's an option for enterprise customers. And then we also have a growth tier for companies who are growing and kind of we think could be strategic partners that will make make custom deals for. So
Nice.
um,
So
yeah,
let's. So unless you want to add something more about, like that, I would want to push forward to sort of like what is the vision of the, Visivo. What
yeah,
do you
that
what
sounds
do you
great.
think you want to go like? So if you could share a little bit more about that, if you have slides, like we could share that, or if you just want to talk, that's also fine. Up to you.
Yeah, I think I could probably just talk through it. I think we've covered
Perfect.
um, a lot of the um, we've covered some of the aspects of the vision. I think what we'd envisioned when we started working on it was really the ability to have this push and this push based architecture
Hmm.
and the ability to have everything be code based and testable, and you can write tests against your traces and the data within them and compare them to other traces and stuff like that too. So we didn't really cover that functionality, but um, really what we envisioned is unlocking the software engineering workflow for analytics
Hmm.
end to end. So data engineering has it, and
Yeah.
it's good there. And we're trying to bring that all the way through to the last mile data visualization. Um, and and so that's really the end goal. And so then the question becomes, well, what do we need to get there? What advantages come along with this architecture? So we talked about a few of them: the ability to look back in time, really
Hmm.
granular access control. You also get with this, um, and and so that's great. But we also need to address the things that other BI tools do really well that are inherently going to be significantly different in Visivo,
Hmm.
right? Because we're not using a DAX, because we're not slicing information. Cross filtering is very
Hmm.
different in Visivo than it would be in Tableau. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, but we need to make sure that we're coming up with solutions to those challenges that enable um, enable people to build great data products that deliver deep insights for stakeholders in a way that's maintainable for developers and analysts.
That sounds good. And before we split apart, do you have like a showcase of the type of the dashboards you can build, which you could share, if any?
Yeah, yeah.
Just in any, like,
So
maybe like a demo dashboard or sub, like the one which you showed to your anything. I don't know, just like curious
yeah, I
to.
can go through a few. I think this one I'm actually running locally right now because I was working on it anyways.
Mhm.
So you can see this is running on my local cert,
Yeah, of course,
uh,
that's so familiar.
but it actually pretty sure this is also on examples here. Yeah, okay. So we have these in our docs. So that's why I was working on it. I was developing the documentation. This is just going through some of the things that you can build with Visivo, um, and looking at I like the bar ones. They're Monty Python themed, so
Mhm.
I find that enjoyable. But um, so that's a few there. We also have a public version of our linear data that I can show you. I like this dashboard a lot. Um, make this a little bigger.
Ooh.
Um, and so you can see some of the interactivity components of Visivo here, um,
What do you
where
do, if
we're
I may
changing
ask,
these
for like the
numbers.
back end of the actual charts? Is like something like your priority? English is hard. Right. Like, is it yours or are you using some third-party library on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, so we are sitting building on top of, Plotly.js.
Okay.
So, we like that library a lot, and, um, we like the architecture that Plotly
Mhm.
has, where, like we talked about earlier, the traces and being able to
Mhm.
replicate those traces in different places. Um, there's some things about the Plotly defaults that
Mhm.
can be somewhat unappealing aesthetically. So
Mhm.
we have been kind of going through and setting more aesthetically appealing defaults as well for how charts come out. I think that's generally probably the biggest pushback that Plotly gets, right? Is some of that aesthetics, um, but yeah, um, you get some of the interactivity that you would expect with BI tool, even with it being static, right?
That's
Um,
Do you have ability to add dimensions and basically like, like add additional dimensions to the exported dashboard, or this is not really an option?
yeah, so that
Because this
that's
is like,
something.
so you don't, like, sorry for me asking this question. Not sorry, not sorry. The thing is just like, if you add dimension, you make it a slicer. And this is
Right.
not a dashboard anymore. And this is where this, like, do you want a dashboard or do you want a slicer? And this is where it's becoming a little bit more
Sure.
trickier to do, because if you're building a dashboard, you actually can slice data differently and present that in the different charts. You don't need to basically
Right.
have everything in one place. And I kind of like wanted to hear your take on that. So if this is dashboard, it shouldn't have a slicing capabilities, or maybe it should. I don't know. Like, I'm just curious. Your
Yeah, so the way, I I think you're asking how does the interactivity work? Is that correct?
sort of, yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
So,
so
so
the,
the
like you said, the
example, so
DAX.
so example would be, let's say I'm looking at the revenue, and now I want to see revenue per country. So
Oh, sure. Yeah.
can I in the same chart change that in the dashboard to see like global view is the revenue, but then I can press a button and it changes to revenue per country.
Right, right. So some basically something similar to this where you're changing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can configure that in Visivo. Now in
Okay.
Visivo, the developer would have to have configured those that chart or trace
Yeah.
ahead
Of
of time,
course.
and you
Yeah.
can
Of
switch
course.
between those charts and traces, but that is essentially how the interactivity works.
Understood.
With
So you
Visivo
kind
is,
got it.
yeah, you change attributes of the configuration client side,
Okay. Get
if
it.
that makes sense.
Yes, thank you for showcasing, and we
Yeah.
way over the time of my planned 30 minutes. So it's really really cool tool. I wish you, like all the good luck with, like proceeding and
Oh,
working.
thank you.
Yeah. So thank you for joining me today, and thank you for sharing. So any last words you want to share?
Yeah, you people can um, people can sign up today, install the command line, and I would love to chat too. You can reach me at jared@visivo.io. Um, and yeah, I don't know if I have any
Great. Oh.
great words of wisdom or highly quotable end clips here,
No,
but
it's not that kind of podcast, Jared.
we're you're supposed to be like you're supposed to be brief, brilliant, and gone, and I think I'm striking out on the first two, so maybe we can maybe we can make the last happen.
Yeah. Okay, Jared. Once again, I didn't expect to see what I saw. I kind of had like a different ideas of what it is.
Oh,
Like
interesting.
before starting this, but I'm really happy what I saw. I think this has so much potential in the other use cases, and let me just share my thoughts on that. So one would
Yeah, I'd
be
love to hear.
is I have a website, and well, I don't have a website, but let's say I have a website where I need to provide a certain information of how the things are doing. And to build a website is actually complicated thing, and especially adding the charts in there, using this tool where I can export like using the open
Right.
source tool, I can create HTML, and then
Yeah.
as I understand, I can just serve that, and that would be the place where I can put it in my website for the people to come and see any type of the
Yeah.
interesting charts if I do. So that's is already like a big part, which is, like done professionally, and I don't need to deal with that. Then another one is just like, okay, how do I provide data to my customers? And that would be over your platform. And that's
Sure.
of course not open source version. I think that would be more like a companies which needs to share the data without sharing access to their infrastructure. I see that would be
Right.
like a use case. And then of course, like if if you're tired of using the Excel or the Google Sheets, you can also use that as well. Anyways,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, definitely.
thank you, Jared, once again for joining me today. Really appreciate that. And take care and bye.
Yeah. Thank you, Artis. Appreciate it.